Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us in this webinar, actually an online workshop with Hannah Prodel and Martina Osterrieder from the University of Bamberg. My name is Christina Höppner, and I'm a representative of the AAEEBL Digital Ethics Task Force, and AAEEBL stands for the Association for the Oh my God. This is very embarrassing right now.
Authentic and
Authentic,
experiential.
yes. Thank you, Kate. I blame it on the jet lag for the authentic, experiential, and evidence-based learning. My colleague Kate, who is also on the task force, saved me right there. And we brought you together because we do want to offer people around the world learning opportunities on different types of portfolios. Because portfolios, of course, can be used in a lot of different ways. Oftentimes it is, though, not a lot of instructors at an institution that work with portfolios, so that we do want to give people the opportunity to connect with each other and also learn from each other. And so in today's webinar, I'm really delighted to introduce you to Hannah Prodel and Martina Osterrieder from the University of Bamberg, who work on the Decollé project there, which looks at improving the support offerings for portfolios, for educators, and then, of course, also in turn for students. And I had the pleasure of meeting Hannah herself in November last year in person. And that all sparked kind of the, hey, can you and do you actually want to give a webinar on the fantastic guide and planning support that you have developed on the project? And then her and her colleagues saying, yes, let's do that. And we've also recorded a podcast interview with them, which will go live at the beginning of next month. And so I'm just really happy that we can connect them also to the rest or to other members of our portfolio community. So over to you, Hannah and Martina.
Thank you, Christina, for your warm introduction. We are delighted to be here today. And hello and welcome everyone to our workshop, Strategic Course Design with ePortfolios, a Practical Guide. Actually, Hannah and me represent a four-member interdisciplinary team from the University of Bamberg, dedicated to advancing digital teaching practices. And together we have developed a planning and decision-making guide to support the effective integration of ePortfolios in higher education. The aim of the next 2 hours will be to introduce you to this guide and to try it out and to discuss it together with you. But before we start, we would like to briefly introduce ourselves. And the four of us are all involved either directly in the project developing digital cultures of teaching, Decollé for short, or associated with the piloting of ePortfolio software at the University of Bamberg. Decollé is funded by the Stiftung Innovation in der Hochschullehre, and in the context of the project, we have developed the planning and decision-making guide for lecturers I have been already talking about. Hannah, would you like to start briefly introducing yourself?
Yes, thank you. And welcome from my side as well. My name is Hannah Prodel, and I'm part of the Decollé project here. I'm located at the Center for University Teaching, so my main focus is to support all the different lecturers we have in any didactic and pedagogical way possible. And one of the projects is the ePortfolio team, and therefore I dived right into this part, and I'm now part of this very active team of 4 people that you can see on the slide right now.
And I am a research assistant at the Chair of General Pedagogy. I work on the ePortfolio sub-project at Decollé together with Martin Sticht. My focus is on didactical issues, while Martin's focus is on the technological aspects. And the fourth member of our team of authors of this planning guide is Cordula Świderski, and she works at the service point for media didactics of the University of Bamberg. Our agenda for the next 2 hours is as follows. We would like to start with a short round of introductions, followed by a 30-minute presentation in which we will introduce you to the diagram. Afterwards, we would like to work with you on specific questions. And we have prepared a set of 2 tasks and a concept board for this purpose. So there will be 2 phases of breakout rooms. What is important, the breakout room sessions will not be recorded. So the aim is that we learn from and with each other, and that we discuss. So you should be able to try out the extent to which the diagram can be useful to you in specific application situations. So let's start with a small introduction session. We would like to get to know you. We have already started a bit right before the session. And we would like to invite you to answer the question you find in the Zoom. Do you see the small quiz or the survey? I see some nodding here. So please answer the question you find in the survey quiz section of Zoom. Half a minute and then we can stop the survey to have a look at it together. Okay, so I can see that 23 people have participated. How long have you been working with ePortfolio? Unfortunately, I cannot see the answer to from which city you are connected. Gina, do you know how we can see this?
No, I think somebody clicked on share results, because I also see the moderator screen, so I don't see the responses there either. Is that maybe Hannah, is that on your screen?
I also see the same, but I'm going to stop that now. So maybe it should
Okay.
work now.
Let me see. I might be able to go through the back end. Let me just refresh
I'm happy to
things.
read out what I can see as an attendee if you'd like. But
Oh, perfect, because we
there's
can,
detail that won't be in there just because it's, you know, qualitative text responses. So you might want to drill down later at what some of those
Yeah,
detailed responses are.
I can share my screen because I do have the results here.
Oh, perfect.
Hold on a sec. Just make things bigger. Share screen. Here we go. Should be able to see the results now.
Great. So we have
Yes.
a lot of colleagues from Germany. Hello and welcome. From Cameroon, from Congo, from Australia, from UK. Hello and welcome to everybody. From Geneva, I see here somebody. Belgium.
And also
So,
Washington.
yeah. So welcome everybody. Nice to have you here. How long have you been working with ePortfolios? So we have a lot of people who have not been working with ePortfolios so far. Nice to have you here either way. We have some people who have less than 1 year experience, but we also have people who are very experienced. So we have a wide range of experience. This will be very interesting in the breakout rooms. We are happy to hear from your results and to discuss with you later on. So a lot of you seem to be working as learning designers, as instructional in the instructional staff, or lecturers, or working in the pedagogical field. Yeah. We are going to learn more about this in the breakout rooms. What are the 3 biggest challenges in course design? Designing, yeah. We are going to talk about this. The time frame, yep. Technical issues, you're naming the student focus, portfolios, tools, feedback aspects, clarifying maybe also parts. Interesting questions and issues. We are going to come back to those questions. And we can continue with our presentations, and we will have a look at those challenges again in our tasks later. So we will come back to this.
All right, there you go.
All right. So let's start with a brief overview of the context in which we developed our teaching resource and what purpose we were designing it for. So as we were talking about the DCOLE project, in this framework of the project, an ePortfolio software has been introduced at the University of Bamberg, and its pilot phase is still being evaluated. The team chose the ePortfolio software Mahara. Evaluations carried out so far have shown that lecturers are often overwhelmed by the task of planning courses using the ePortfolio software. Lecturers often adopted existing, tried and tested course concepts without taking into account the specific characteristics of ePortfolio software as a learning and assessment medium. And despite their initial motivation, this led to frustration and additional work for lecturers and students, and as a result, declining acceptance. Next one. In the project context, in which the university's permanent structures, for example, the Center of University Teaching and the IT service, were involved right from the outset, various existing materials, checklists, and flowcharts were reviewed, linked, and provided by the support to support the lecturers. And based on feedback from lecturers during guided interviews, the project team learned that lecturers lacked a visualization tool that could facilitate the planning of ePortfolio-based courses from the start and first decisions until the end. The interdisciplinary team then worked on a visualization for lecturers in a co-constructive and iterative process. And we built also on existing material, which is of course referenced in our diagram. The visualization was intended to tie together didactical and technical considerations in the planning process. In addition, relevant criteria for deciding for or against the use of ePortfolio software were to be integrated. Lecturers were to be systematically guided through the course planning process from the decision for or against ePortfolio software to the organization of portfolio archiving. Central to our team's work is the principle of constructive alignment underlying the diagram. It is structurally inherent in the visualization and is intended to help instructors systematically align the required exam performance with the learning objectives or competency formulations, as well as the methods and learning activities during the course. And to ensure this, lecturers are guided through the course planning process using guiding questions. It was important to us that the diagram uses as little specialized terminology as possible to lower the threshold to use it for all lecturers, regardless of their experience or their didactical or technical knowledge. We would like now to present the structural design step by step, and I will hand over to Hannah for this.
Thank you, Martina. We're going to take a look and a deeper and closer look at exactly what you can see right now. So this is our planning and decision-making guide. And as you can see already, it is very, very complex, and therefore we're going to go step by step. So don't worry if this looks like a lot of text on a very small screen or a big screen, but we're going to go step by step. Martina mentioned that we work closely with the idea and the construct of the constructive alignment, which you can also see in this decision-making aid. We're going to start with the green part, the green column, so to speak. These are our guiding questions. So whenever you want to work with our decision-making aid or planning aid, usually you start from the left and you go on further to the right. These questions will then guide you towards the constructive alignment, which you can see in the light yellow column. So we wanted to make sure that whenever you're working or thinking about planning or going on with wherever you are at in your process of deciding whether you want to work with ePortfolios, you always come back to the question, is it really good for what I'm actually doing with my course? Does it fit my course description? And in combination to that, we also wanted to give you suggestions. So things to think further about and then go on in the process. We're skipping, as you can see, a few steps in the middle, which, as you can see, are maybe red and have the word caution. We're going to get into that later on, but on the right side, so you can see almost half of the page is now circled. This is the technical implementation, because, as Martina already said, we want to think both of those parts together. We want to bring them together, and therefore there are a few things that we discovered when we talked and worked with our lecturers that they shied away from, and we just wanted to put it out in the open and talk about it and take it into consideration. All right, so we're now going to start coming back to the green, the start. And the first question that you have to ask yourself is, I am considering working with an ePortfolio. Is this useful for my course? Which question should we have then? What do I want my students to learn? So as you can already tell, we're now leaning towards the yellow, the lighter yellow. So the learning objectives and the competencies that we want our students to end up with at the end of the course, which then brings us to suggestions that we're offering you, which are also very competency oriented. So what is the competence profile that we're working with in this course? Are we taking all of those subject-specific competency models that we need for this course into consideration when deciding whether or not to use ePortfolios? And also, do we have taxonomy levels that we can actually work here? Which competency levels do we want our students to achieve? This helps us to really bring closer or get a closer look at whether or not it is actually sensible to work with ePortfolios. As soon as we decided on that, we can go back to our next green question, which is, do the regulations, for example, the module that our course is going to be placed in, allow a portfolio as a form of examination? Is this important for me? And also, what evaluation criteria do I have, and how do I prioritize these? All of those bring us back to the constructive alignment question of examination format. So we now have two of the three important parts of constructive alignment, the learning objective and competencies and examination format that we're already thinking about in the beginning of our process of deciding or even planning our course. You can already see we have a few questions lined up for you. So which parts or points, in which points of time do I want to evaluate? What is the subject of my evaluation in this course? Which tasks do the students have to do? Do I evaluate formatively, so ongoing, or summatively, so conclusively? Or do I want to evaluate them in groups or individually? Do I want them to receive feedback, or do I want them to give peer feedback in the process? And do I evaluate the entire process, or am I just evaluating the project in the end? And this brings us to the red box that I already mentioned, which we think is really important. You need to be cautious in this process, or you can be cautious in this process, because if you only require individual files, for example, you want the students to hand in a PDF at the end of the class, as an exam submission, using a portfolio system might be a little too complex, and this might end up in frustration on your side or your student's side. And therefore, you can already decide whether or not you want to go on further. We don't want you to put in work into something that is not necessary or is not going to bring you the results that you're looking for. As soon as you decided, well, I think actually it is more than a PDF that I want to work with my students, we can then skip on further to the next green question, which is, how do I implement the ePortfolio in my course? We decided we're going to, but how? So the method. We're now at the third part of the constructive alignment, which usually should come at the end, because you need to have your learning objectives and your evaluation techniques settled before you go into whether or not this is a good method for you. We then have central methodological aspects that you can look at and incorporate into the thought process from now on. Is you can use it as activation for your students throughout impulses and peer feedback, which was already mentioned throughout the semester. It is also interesting to look at the systematic development and promotion of metacognitive strategies among students. For example, self-directed learning through targeted guidance and creative freedom. So we have many different aspects that we can now dive into. Also, media literacy is something that is very important. That's why we want to work with ePortfolios more in more settings at our university, but also the documentation and reflection of the learning process, the verbalization of what is actually happening throughout my learning process is very important. And ePortfolios can help with that. You can also incorporate different levels of reflection on learning, and you can also work in revision loops. So you can have iterations, which is also something that students can work and learn with even more. And you can also have a guided self-reflection process here. So those are things that you can now incorporate into your process. As you know, we're like speeding through this, but we want to give you an idea of when to think of what. And we know this is a lot of different things to think about, and that's why we created this guide to go step by step. We're now skipping back a little further again, 1 second, because, oh, I'm skipping the wrong direction. I'm sorry. I was a little, we're now zooming out a little bit, so we can now see once again the 3 parts of the constructive alignment in light yellow, and then we went through all the planning and implementation suggestions, and they both lead us to one decision, so to speak. The form of the portfolio is determined by the examination format and the method. As soon as we have that settled, we can now, as you can see, go a little further to the right side. We have this white box. The decision is made. We can work in a medial way. We can work cumulative, iterative, process-oriented, and structuring. And this is all possible with an ePortfolio system. As you can already see, the arrows are actually pointing to the right side. We're not going to go there just yet because we want to take a look at the other green questions before I then hand over to Martina in just a moment. Because as soon as we decided on all of those aspects, we then also should start thinking about how do I introduce it, how do I support it, and how do I complete the process. This is something that you should think of in the beginning. It's not all of the decisions don't have to be made from the beginning on, but it is something you should definitely consider from the beginning you start actually planning on working with ePortfolios. What does it mean when we talk about how do I introduce it? What we learned is that transparency when it comes to the objectives, the implementation methods, and the evaluation criteria is very, very important for the students, but also for yourself. Make sure to create a transparent way of dealing with that. And also, because it is a technical thing to work with, make sure to know who to contact in what situation, not just you, but also the students. Do the students know who they can actually talk to when it comes to technical questions, when it comes to organizational questions and didactical questions? And what we also discovered is we have a vast variety of materials now, instructional manuals, tutorials, etc., that we can now also hand out and work with. For example, this planning aid is also one of those that we hand out to our lecturers, and they like to work with it. And when it comes to how do I support this? Well, it is a work process in phases, and there's something you should also consider. You have an introductional period, you have a collection period, you have a selection period, and a revision period, then reflection, presentation, and evaluation. So many different process steps that can obviously work in or occur in iterations, but those all can be guided, or you can guide the students through that with impulses that you can already decide on in the beginning to make the process easier for yourself. So we now ran through all those parts of the decision-making guide. I'm going on one further so you can see that we actually work through the entire green steps. And I would now like to give over to Martina, who's now going to go a little further into the depth of the technical aspects of our decision-making guide.
Thank you, Hannah. So we would like to link now the methods and learning objectives parts to the more technical parts. And we take the two green questions: what evaluation criteria do I have, and how do I prioritize these, and how do I implement the ePortfolio in my course, and have a look what this means for the technical part. For example, if I want to have or to use the ePortfolio and have an assessment, then I have to decide whether it should be a group portfolio or an individual portfolio. If, as a lecturer, I want my students to submit an individual assessment and that I can archive, I have to create a group for the course, and additional groups would be necessary for group portfolios. Click. Then I have to answer questions such as how much flexibility or degrees of freedom should the students have when creating the portfolios. If, for example, more structure is to be provided in the portfolio system, for example, to minimize the correction effort, then a template can make sense. Then I have to create this as a lecturer and make it available for the group to copy. However, we as a team tend to advise against the use of templates because the individual creativity offered by the ePortfolio system then is restricted. Even if I don't use a template, I can give my students guidelines about which content types they should use as a minimum, for example. In the large table in pink and red with the dark blue outline, you find a selection of ideas as an inspiration on how certain content types could be used. The list is incomplete, but can also be presented to students as an excerpt to give them an idea of which media they could use for what, in order to achieve a certain media diversity in the portfolios or to find a medium appropriate to the content. These artifacts and resources are then collected and can be integrated in pages, selected, reselected, and organized. Pages can be integrated in collections and finally are submitted for assessment or feedback. They can also be released for revision and, of course, commented. But before students start working with ePortfolio, I have to think about how to introduce them to the software and the concept of portfolio work and how the support is to be provided, because both are crucial to the success of ePortfolio work. Before I think about doing it all myself, I should find out about resources and look for synergies. We've already talked about materials, but cooperation partners such as the IT service or key competence centers at universities, or even other colleagues with similar goals can be helpful in joining forces. In addition, I should consider the regular timing of the portfolio system use and, for example, feedback phases during my course. I should also consider how this can be organized. On the one hand, this ensures that students get practice in using the system and that synchronous technical support can be offered at a low threshold. On the other hand, it encourages students to enter learning objects on a regular basis, on the basis of which they can then reflect further. Lecturers should also consider providing regular and appropriate impulses. Even if I want to implement certain forms of interaction in my ePortfolio system, for example, peer feedback, I should not only instruct and accompany this in a didactically sensible way, but also give the students the opportunity to get to know the tools in the ePortfolio system with which they can implement it. And Mahara, as an example, offers various options for this, as you can see here in this incomplete list in the blue frame. Finally, I should also be aware as a lecturer of how I implement the evaluation, where I record and archive my reasons for the evaluation. This is the last question. How do I complete the process? And thus conclude the process. I should be familiar with the legal basis of my university and know what requirements are placed on the archiving of examination results. And once I have thought through and planned all of this, I can start my ePortfolio-based course. So this has been a quick tour de force through all of the questions we have here on our planning and decision-making guide. On the next slide, you find the literature and the sources we used. And now we would like to thank you very much for listening, and we are very happy to receive your questions.
Thank you so much, Hannah and Martina, for the overview of your decision-making guide. Anybody with questions, please do feel free to put them into the chat, or if you like, you can also raise your hand so that we can give you the microphone if you want to ask the question yourself. But we do have one question in the chat. That is how to integrate ePortfolio activity into existing professional development plan or in lesson planning.
Well, in general, I think this is if you already have an existing course, I think going back to the 3 parts of the constructive alignment is a good way to start, because you already have your plan, and it is important to see which, for example, is it something you want to use as an evaluation system? So are there going to be grades connected to using the ePortfolio system, or is it something you want to use more of as a reflection device? That is something that you need to decide on in the beginning, and therefore then take a look at what are the learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve here, and then as the next step, decide on which parts of the process ePortfolio would be some of good use, so to speak. It could be a good thing to use this question for the next group activity in your group, because you can then take a closer look at your very own course. That's what we're intending to do with you, and maybe also get some feedback from the other professionals in the field, so to speak. All right. Any other questions? Also, if you want to say something else, Martina, go ahead. Yeah. Rachel.
Hi, thank you. I was very interested when you said that thinking about whether to advise towards providing a template or not, and then the consideration around allowing for the full creativity and freedom of designing a portfolio so that the learner can actually have that creative freedom. But we've had examples, for example, where it may be year 1 undergraduate students, it might be a whole new approach to learning. They've never done anything maybe quite like this before. So I'd be interested to hear a bit more about your thoughts around how do you scaffold someone for the learning experience if someone's coming to it without much prior experience of maybe reflective learning, or are there other ways that you think about, if it's not through templates, maybe providing exemplars or that kind of thing? It'd be great to hear a bit more of your thoughts.
Yes, of course. Thank you for your question. We have made, or there are different ways that we have made good experiences with. One thing we have made good experiences with are some introductory courses concerning the technical introductions to the software. At the University of Bamberg, we are using Mahara, which we perceived not as very beginner friendly, so to say. So there is a certain threshold for beginners to use it, and we made very good experience with introductory courses for the technical part, and then with we are offering those for students and also for lecturers, so that both have a certain basic knowledge And then we found out during our interviews with lecturers that it is crucial that lecturers really use the ePortfolio software during their courses. That they, for example, have impulses where students work with the software during their course. And we also had lecturers who used templates, but so templates that means that the impulse is already in the ePortfolio software, and that there are pre-structured parts in the system. The problem is that the students think, I don't have to do a lot of, or I don't have to learn a lot of new stuff. I only have to integrate what is already there. And they have the illusion that it is not complicated or that they don't have to learn a lot of new things. So they don't really go the process of collecting, selecting, restructuring, which is crucial to the reflection process that we usually want. So our experience is that templates don't really work with the process-oriented portfolio. Maybe there are some scenarios where templates work very well, but our experience says that it is a bit against our intentions. Other ways of introducing beginners are way better. So providing support structures, having regular impulses during the semester, and also differentiating learning levels and having different support levels for the students provided. To having them in the loop during the semester, not letting them alone. But this is not something which is special for ePortfolio work in general, but for process-oriented learning in general.
Thank you. That's really great to hear your thoughts about that. We have similar experience, I think, in terms of I'm at University of Bath, and we also have Mahara, and the orientation for beginners is something that we're sort of trying to work on, both from the student side and the staff side as well. So thanks for your thoughts. That's really helpful.
Also have a message that was just chatted to me, because it seems like Jonas has a bit of a problem with keeping his hands raised. There are potentially some internet connectivity issues. So their question is, what method can be used to write a good portfolio?
Maybe I can start by saying that there are very different formats of portfolios. So there are different forms of portfolios. So we already saw that we have some colleagues who are new to portfolio work, and for the didactical part, there are different forms and different aims of portfolio work. And if you have decided for aims and the form of the portfolio, you can then plan further, and weighing those different aims and deciding for the methods, then also will influence the assessment you will then decide on. So it's also again a question of the alignment of those three parts that we have been talking about before. Yes, it's the constructive alignment part, maybe, but we can so it's not the one good ePortfolio, but there may be different formats of it.
And there was just
depending on the
something
aims.
mentioned in the chat about portfolios that are where they're being they are using templates in a very structured form, and there it makes a lot of sense. So it really depends on your learning outcomes and your evaluation methods and what you want the students to take away from the process. We just in our world right here have many lecturers who work in specific fields where it just makes sense not to use those templates. However, we do have other lecturers who use them. And the thing is really thinking about which parts need to be supervised in a stronger way than others, I would say. So I definitely also, we're not against them entirely. We just have many different examples that are just like without templates in that way. Yeah, Christina.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to follow on that, I think what we might also want to keep in mind is that a template is not a template, because you have many different types of templates. So even if you just ask a question and maybe have a couple of structuring headlines, that could already be a template to give students an idea of these are the general themes or topics I want you to talk about. So it doesn't have to be put a picture here, write your reflection right next to it, and then in the next paragraph, put a video here and then write your reflection or things like that. So we can still be very creative, just providing a minimum structure, for example.
Yes. Looking at the time, I would say we're jumping into the next phase of our webinar. I've already shown part of our slide already. We're now heading into our first group activity, which is going to be in the breakout rooms. We want you to use a concept board. Janina already posted the link. I'm going to post it again. For the concept board, we want you to capture your group's answers and insights there. I'm going to explain what you're going to do in just a moment, but if you log into or you're clicking on the link, you can enter our concept board by just becoming a guest. So you don't have to sign up for a concept board. You can log into by using the guest link. All right, so the question we want to go through with you is, or what we want you to do is, you are going to design a course, or you're going to be a consultant of a course designer. Because we heard that not that many people are actually lecturers here, some of them are, but others are in the same position as Martina and I, so we're more of it in a consulting role. You can choose whoever wants to participate in or bring in their own thoughts in the process of the group activity. We want you to choose a real course or concentration setting one of you is familiar with, and based on the constructive alignment parts of the planning aid. So questions 1 to 5, the green questions 1 to 5, explore how learning goals and methods could be aligned with an ePortfolio-based learning experience. Answer the guiding questions according to your use case, so the green and yellow boxes, and develop a rough plan that integrates an ePortfolio meaningfully. We know 25 minutes is not enough to really go through this process entirely. We just want you to start the process and get into conversation with each other to talk about your experiences and maybe have some, we call it aha moments in German, so just some insights that you can take away with you. Just to give you an idea on the concept board itself, you will find somewhat of a system we're trying to guide you through. You will be directed to one breakout session group, and you will see the number of the breakout session group, and that number will also be the group number on the board. And as soon as you're on the board, there will be a template for you to use. So we're using templates in other cases ourselves. We have the question again for you. And we also have a link to the planning and decision-making guide in the light green box. So if you did not catch that just yet, you can find it there as well. You can also find the decision-making guide on the concept board, but we thought it might be easier to have it on a different screen. Please put in your names of the group, and then also in just a few sentences or less than that, use a short description of your scenario, maybe which faculty you're from, etc., so that you can just find what the key aspects of your scenario are, and then you can just collect all your thoughts and ideas. We're not going to go through all the different groups' experiences afterwards. We're just going to talk about the highlights. So if you have questions or insights that you want to share afterwards, we're going to do that in the big group afterwards. As Martina said, this part is not going to be recorded, so we want you to have a safe space to talk about this. And the last question is, are there any questions before we will send you into the breakout sessions? Doesn't seem to be the case. Then I'm going to start with, come back. We saw some actions and movement on the boards, and we'd love to hear how that group activity went for you. As you all heard, we're now back in the recording mode, so whatever you're going to say now will be recorded. Which is a good start to tell me something about your experiences. I'd like to ask the group one, did you have any insights? Do you want to share some insights? Was it how was it to go through the questions in the group?
I think we're in group one, but I wasn't quite sure. We got very distracted with lots of other things, so we didn't get a chance to go through the questions. But we did start to talk about goals and credit points, and yeah, there's a lot that needs to kind of feed into you know, developing a portfolio and a course. Yeah.
All right, yeah, there are many things to think about. I think, yeah, the credit points and all of these things do have to be discussed, especially in the beginning, because otherwise you'll end up with quite the complex situation that you might not want to deal with afterwards. Okay, thank you. How about group two? Any insights or things you want to share with us?
I could probably talk to our group if that's useful, but if somebody else in our group wants to take the microphone, please feel free to override me, or if I miss something. So we had a mix of different people in our group, from a couple of people who were pretty new to ePortfolios and didn't necessarily have a course that they were at that stage of yet. Sorry, I just got the language to come up. And then a couple of us who are educational designers, and so we kind of discuss some of the challenges we have, especially around some of the technical aspects, and looking at what has worked and what hasn't worked, or what we're kind of seeing in practice. So I think that was still useful. Whether it actually did what we were asked to, though, I don't know. But yeah, I think there was like Kenneth said, there's a lot of complexity there, and there are some things that I think work, and other things that like you've got in the decision tool around caution, and I guess the other thing is to really get different teams in early, because some of those technical aspects are going to interact with your activity design as well.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. That's exactly what we wanted to focus on with asking those questions right in the beginning. All right. How about group three?
We were in group three. I did most of the talking in the group as well, so I'm sorry about that. It's just quite daunting when everyone sat there and we're like, I don't know what we're going to do. What do you do? So one of our members was redesigning their master's students course and want to use an ePortfolio. So what we thought, we're just basically having a chat about what they were actually doing now and because it's basically designing it in rather than designing a new course. So having to fit in with existing approved assessment practice. So the assessment is still going to be an exam. So this is like using an ePortfolio as a student engagement tool, because in the lectures it's basically stood at the front of the lecture theatre talking at them, and there's not that much activity. So the design of this ePortfolio is to get the students to think along the way so that they can talk to each other and share ideas around a set of case studies. And he wants to develop their basic like social skills, their problem solving skills, because it's about IT strategic management. But at the moment, it's basically a series of lectures with no evaluation of how they're actually doing and when they get their final exam. But what the idea is that they would look at these case studies, learn how to look at case studies through the ePortfolio tools, and then he gives feedback every other week. And there'll also be peer feedback as well, so they can learn from each other because they'll have different levels of experiences. And then we're just basically we were flicking between the planning and decision tool that you have and this concept board, like what was it was supposed to be doing. But it was very much having a chat about what's happening and what the purpose of it all was, and then trying to fit this in to make it more realistic. Yeah, so that's what we did. It's useful though, very useful.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's what we experienced with our lectures in the beginning, is focusing on the method ePortfolio before asking those questions, and like, why do I want to use it and what is the outcome going to be? So we anticipated that all of you are going to do that step by step. It is also not meant like that. Obviously, it's very structured, but we do have lecturers who just jump into the parts that are important. However, those first questions are still there to be looked at and to be considered. In what way is definitely what each person can individually decide. So thank you. That was also quite an interesting experience. All right, group number 4. Any other experiences or things to add?
Happy to
Yeah.
feedback if that's okay. And similarly, if anyone else in the group thinks of anything I've missed, please do jump in as well. So we were thinking about a scenario of like a teacher training learning scenario. And one of the things that came up was about where you would, in that case, perhaps have like a competencies framework. So I had mentioned about some experience with Mahara using an evidence framework, and that some ePortfolio platforms have a mechanism where you can kind of map out criteria, and then there's a way that it's very easy for learners when they're building their portfolio to kind of map and show where evidence is meeting those criteria. So that was something a bit different that came up. And we didn't get so far, I think, with the sort of into the process of working through. But certainly from my point of view, I found the visual aspect of having that kind of in this case it's through the whiteboard, but equally you could do it in a room on a board or whatever. But having those prompts to think about the learning goals, the methods, that start mapping out ideas and then putting them all out visually, I think was something that seemed helpful part of the process. And I could imagine that being really helpful in discussion with someone who wants to design a portfolio but maybe hasn't got good knowledge or experience of using it already. So you sort of go back to that the learning objectives, you get it all mapped out. So that was good. I don't know if anyone else in the group wants to add anything, if there's any other thoughts.
All right. It doesn't seem like that, but thank you very much, Rachel. I think that's also quite that is quite where we wanted to get you. to talk about these things and just keep them in mind. As a part of the Center for Teaching and Teaching at the university here, we do encounter that not just with ePortfolios, but we thought it was really important to start with these questions, especially because I don't know how it is in other countries, but for us, it's not mandatory for lecturers at the university to go through a didactical training. And therefore, these aspects such as constructive alignment and just like, where do I start with planning any kind of course, any kind of lecture, is usually something that just is something they learn or pick up along the way. And that is why we wanted to also include it into this process. All right. And I think we also have group 5, which is the last but not least group. Any other things you would like to add? Any experiences or questions also about the process?
Well,
Okay. Sorry, we have to us coming in the same time. I'm sure we've done it. Done it. Maybe you go ahead first. Okay.
No, they all very kindly caught me up on the last little bit. I was late to the meeting, so they gave me an overview of what the last hour was in our meeting, our little
Okay.
catch up. So yeah, but it was nice to hear and shared an example of a ePortfolio, but it's part of a voluntary assessment. So they get to choose the method, and it can be the choice either between the essay or choosing an ePortfolio method, which was interesting. But yeah, we talked about our experiences and what our current sort of scenarios that we're using ePortfolios were. So that was more of our discussion that we happened.
It is what our aim is to start that discussion. So that is perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you all for participating in the first group activity. As we said, we wanted to take some of the time of these 2 hours to really dive into really working with tools such as our aid. And I'm going to start my presentation once again and hand it over to you, Martina, to
Yes,
give
thank
you
you,
a heads
Hannah.
up.
And we're building on what you have been thinking about so far. And we are doing a second activity, which will be about 15 minutes again. Please use the concept board again and use the second one to design a learning workflow. Based on questions 6 to 8 in green on the planning and decision making guide, please note crucial phases, student tasks, submission moments, feedback opportunities, and portfolio components that contribute to a learning workflow that meaningfully integrates ePortfolio work across the teaching unit or consultation you developed before. And second, what experiences do you have? Which challenges do you anticipate due to your institution's context? Note ideas and learnings. We invite you again to color code and to discuss in your groups. If you want to, you can invite us to your breakout rooms to discuss with you or to answer some questions. And again, the breakout rooms will not be recorded, so you can discuss without us listening. Do you have any questions?
Maybe just as an
concerning-
addition, the group activity number 2 is right below the group activity number 1. So you'll find it
Exactly.
and right underneath.
It is connected to your first board with the yellow arrow. So you find it below, and you can use all the tools, the sticky notes, the arrows you see on the board and write on it. Okay, so you will be back in the same breakout rooms as before. And I don't see any questions so far. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I will open the breakout rooms again. So welcome back to our plenary session. Thank you for discussing and working together. And now we're very curious what you have been discussing. And I would suggest that we're just quickly summarizing what was important to you, what insights you had in general, working on those two questions. So who would like to start? I will not ask every group, but who would like to share some insights, some experiences, some learnings, maybe also some questions?
I will, because no one else is saying anything. I wasn't going to do this, but it was actually quite an interesting exercise, because I think a lot of people leave this bit to the last minute, like the who's going to support this, and and in our group, the person that's setting up the portfolio is going to do all of it, like all the support, everything. And I was trying to sort of say it's about a student engagement issue. It's something you have to get the students engaged in doing it. Otherwise, and if they think that they're going to get the same result at the end, regardless of whether or not they engage in the ePortfolio, why would they do it? So I think showing value to students across the piece is important, and probably showing previous year's students, if you can, or making up one to say this is something they've done before. And then we talked about bringing employers in to say the skills that they value the most, which are the skills that this person's developing, are the important ones, not the data, not all the theories. So I think showing value and how it's recognised by employers, especially if you're doing like a master's level course, which is what they were doing, would be very valuable, and the students could see the value, and therefore they're more likely to engage, and therefore they'll listen, and etc. So that's what we talked about. Well, I talked about.
Thank you, Fiona. That's a very, very important aspect. And also this aspect of joining forces is maybe something that has to be highlighted, as lecturers have a lot of tasks to fulfill, and are sometimes very motivated, and have to take care also of their resources.
It's also
Thanks.
in the chat was also
Yeah.
mentioned that another group talked about showing past students ePortfolios as well, and why we thought this question or this task was quite good is because it's sometimes really the simple things you have to think about. For example, we tell our lecturers to really set dates for sending out impulses or to send out those new ideas or questions, because this is, as Martina just said, we have a lot of things on our desk, and this might be something that you forget, and just like really schedule it out from the beginning on. Sounds like such a mundane and so irrelevant, but it is really what brings the ePortfolio work together, to think the process through. Yeah, so thank you for that. We can definitely agree with that.
And sometimes it doesn't have to be the student examples, for example, from your university, but for us, for example, we are using examples from our colleagues from another university, or from the OTH Aachen, which we link, and we name our colleagues and value their work in that sense also. And it's just a link for us, and it saves us a lot of work. And their project work is being highlighted by that. So that's also a way of joining forces. Any other insights, learnings, questions?
We're in group 1 again, and we talked a little bit about AI and how that's, what can we do to reduce cheating and things like that. one suggestion was direct observation. That's not always practical, but it's could be something to include. We also looked at the use of role-playing case studies within portfolios. The analysis of those could be a nice task. And that tasks can be short and concise. They don't need to be really, overly complex and big, I guess. Yeah. That was us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your impulse. Any other learnings, insights? Or do you have maybe also some feedback on the process you ran through now? You know the planning and decision-making guide a bit better.
Well, maybe we can just get into the feedback in general, because we have it on the concept board, and then you can think about it for a minute or two, and then we can collect it that way.
Yes, let's do that way.
So we do have feedback on the concept board right below the last group activity. It would be perfect if you could just note down or jot down whatever comes to your mind. We just did it in a very agile way, like learn, long for. Obviously, you don't have to fill in everything, but if you have an impulse to add something, that would be perfect. We'd like to give you 3 to 4 minutes for that, and then we'll just look at it real quick, and then we'll hand it over to Christina for her last information. For the last few minutes, Martina and I just wanted to thank you very much for participating in our webinar. It was very, very interesting for us to hear about your different experiences. And also, Christina, once again, thank you for giving us the stage to present and talk about our learning and planning and decision-making aid. We are also always happy to hear about whatever we can change about it. It is an open education resource, so feel free to let us know. And we'd also love to stay in contact. So we're definitely happy to have this international community to talk about ePortfolios. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone. And with that, it's back to you, Christina.
And maybe
Thank you, Hannah and
one
Martina.
addition.
Yeah, Martina, go ahead.
If anybody wants to say in contact or has some questions, feel free to approach us. We are happy to go on and discuss and exchange.
Thank you so much to the two of you for having shown us a way of how getting started with portfolios, or maybe already if people have started with portfolios, of how to approach maybe a new portfolio activity in a very structured way, and therefore support the implementation of portfolios. Kate had also shared in her last feedback there that the programmatic approach, programmatic assessment also falls into that, so that we are looking at the entire program. I really enjoyed your online workshop today, and you also having brought so many different people from many different continents together, which is also a testament to the importance of the topic and also the need for that support in order to know whom to reach out and what resources are available. Your planning and decision-making guide is available as a Creative Commons licensed resource. So if somebody wants to adopt it, go right ahead. If you want to expand on it, or if you want to make it shorter, if you want to build on it, please do also share it then, I think, with Hannah and Martina and the rest of their team, because I'm pretty sure they'd be very interested to know what somebody else is making out of it. And therefore also help them understand more of what they might also want to do at their university in Germany. And now I'd like to invite you, if you'd like to have similar sessions like this in the future, to follow us, follow AAEEBL on Humanitech, because whenever we are setting up a new webinar that we are organizing for the community, you will get an email notification straight away. If you want to share your own resources or what you have been doing, please do get in touch with me, because I'd be happy to organize more of these webinars. So thanks everybody that you have made time today, and have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, or night.